Welcome to Loyalize,
a podcast brought to you by D Squares about customer relationships and retention. I'm Yasmin.
and I'm Bob, and on this podcast we invite world-leading experts to dive into the world of building strong loyalty.
Today we're zooming in on something we don't always connect, which is good customer service isn't just about solving problems or greeting at the door, but a foundation for loyalty that can last years. So today I'm joined by Robert Spector, a best-selling author and journalist who's been telling real stories about iconic customer experiences for decades now. Welcome, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us on the Loyalize podcast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you.
So you've written books your first book was The Nordstrom Way, Inside Story of America's #1 customer service company, the mom and pop store, and the book that I have now, but also your newest book, which was published last year, The Century-Old Startup.
And also, I may add, I wrote the first book about Amazon.com, which came out 25 years ago this month. It's called Amazon.com Get Big Fast. I did get an opportunity to interview Jeff Bezos. I have a picture of the two of us in November of 1998. I could send you that picture. Both of us had more hair. That book came out so long ago, I had to explain what the internet was.
What made you continue or keep coming back to Nordstrom rather than Amazon?
Well, just to give you a little bit of background, I was, before I became an author and a speaker, I was a journalist. And I worked for a group of newspapers out of New York. I had a call from a literary agent whose next door neighbor at that time was Nordstrom's top salesman. He had been #1 salesman 15 years in a row, and asked me if I'd be interested in writing a book with him. And so fast forward, that book didn't come out for another 5 years. Trying to get a New York publisher done and writing a proposal, et cetera, et cetera. And then it became a bestseller thanks to my efforts, not so much the publisher. And it changed my life. I became a public speaker. And so that came out in 1995. As we got closer to 2005, I thought it would be great to have a 10-year anniversary edition. I'd add another chapter and I'd be done. But I reread that 1995 book, and it was so old and dated. It didn't mention something called the internet. So I decided to blow up that book and create a brand new book with new interviews. So there came out in 2005. I did another one that came out in 2012, and then the book that you have, which came out in 2017. And one of the reasons why I keep writing about Nordstrom is that Nordstrom keeps changing and adapting, and which every company needs to do. So, and that ultimately brought me to my most recent book, The Century-Old Startup.
And I think the fact that you do keep coming back to Nordstrom is a sign that they are adapting to stay relevant and adapting with the latest innovations, but also a sign that they're protecting their culture as well, which is something that I think is important now when we come to talk about innovations and digitization, and especially in an industry or like customer service is really reliant on humans. So I think it's interesting. The fact that you're coming back to Nordstrom is a sign of both things, like the legacy, but also the adapting.
Nordstrom was founded in 1901. So next year it'll be 125 years old. It started out as a little shoe store in downtown Seattle, Washington, and today it's the most important retailer in New York City. They're famous for their customer service and their culture. We talked earlier a little bit about culture, and as I tell my audiences when I speak, the Nordstrom story is a culture story. And it's, even though it's been a publicly traded company since 1972, it is still run by people named Nordstrom, the fourth generation of Nordstrom family members. And so the fact that the family, and they're still active, and every family member starts out at the most menial job. So it's not like, they're the crown prince, and you graduate college and there's your corner office and now you're the boss. That's very un-Nordstrom like. You have to earn it.
Great to see, sweet.
Right, exactly. All the years that I've been a public speaker, most of the groups I speak to are not in retail. It really doesn't matter because everybody has a customer, and the lessons you can learn from Nordstrom you can apply to literally any business.
You mentioned this a lot as well in your book. You talk about, well, across all of your books, about working for your family butcher shop.
Right.
I think it's interesting that your stories like that really do shape our beliefs early on about how to deal with people and how to approach people. So, like mom and pop, but then with Nordstrom, it's like mom and pop go large. And it's interesting to see how they've been able to still protect that, but also grow. And that's something that I think I also want to touch on with you. When businesses do scale, how can you maintain that personal impact or the personal exchange and human connection?
Well, I think it goes back to the culture. So
Yeah,
if people grow up in the business and they see how things are run, and the most important thing is putting the customer first.
right.
Now, the whole idea is to make customers um, feel good and look good. So if you in any customer service initiative that Nordstrom has, it starts out with how does this create a positive experience for the customer? It's not just getting the latest software, the latest app because it's cool. How does it enhance the customer experience? And at Nordstrom, they say if it's not helping the customer, it's not customer service. So it's very simple. I mean, things that I talk about are so simple, but people have to be reminded of that. And you mentioned my working in my parents' butcher shop. I mean, that's ground zero for retail. There's nothing between you and the customer. It's the experience. And my father, who was an immigrant from the Ukraine with an eighth grade education, I mean, he was great at customer service. So the times I'd be speaking to customers like Dell Computer or Pfizer Pharmacy, I would say, and I would tell some stories about my father, and I would say, surely this immigrant with an eighth grade education, if he could figure it out, surely all the smart people in this room can figure it out too. And people would come up to me and said that I love the stories about your father and how he worked with his customers because it's not corporate stuff; it's real life. It's the exchange of money for goods and services. It's the most basic. Commerce, trade is the most basic human relationship that we have. You go to the marketplace, and it's not just about buying, paying money for goods or services. It's also learning what's happening in the community. It's not just being transactional. It's creating a sustained relationship. That's the ideal.
You do mention a sales associate was saying that he wasn't selling, the way he described his job, he wasn't selling shoes or a product, he was selling a relationship.
Right.
I think there are many lessons to be learned from the book. Actually, let me bring it up. The 3 questions to ask as a team. Are you contributing to a meaningful customer experience? Are you creating loyalty? And are you contributing to the financial health of the business or organization? And I think it's interesting your use of words here, where it's contributing to a meaningful relationship, contributing to financial health, but then creating loyalty. And I just wanted to ask you about that part because loyalty as something to be created, what does that mean?
So let's say that I'm a shoe salesman and you come into the store and you're looking for a pair of shoes. So, I'm obviously going to, measure the size of your foot I'm going to be bringing not just one pair of shoes for you to try. I'm going to bring 4 pairs of shoes for you to try. 3 of them will be somewhere in what you're looking for. One is completely different. I'm going to bring them out. You're going to try them on. You're going to make sure that they fit, that they go with your the outfits that you want, etc. And then while I measure your foot, one of the things that Nordstrom does, if your right foot is 1.5 sizes or more different than your left foot, because not everybody has the same size both feet, they will break up a pair of shoes. So it's making sure I'm going to get you into a product that you really like, that you're going to wear, and you will have trusted me that I sold you the right product for you at the right time, at the right price.
So it's about how the salesperson sort of demonstrates their ability to meet the customer's needs.
Right. The good salespeople say it's not a me experience, me being the sales, it's a we experience. If I'm trying to sell you the most expensive thing that I have, and maybe it's not perfect for you, and you go home with this item and your friend or your partner, your spouse says, "Why did you buy that? That's terrible." So, you'll be able to bring it back, but you're not going to trust that salesperson because they weren't looking out for your best interest. They were looking out for their best interest. And that does
Right.
not create loyalty. That does not create repeat business.
And you won't necessarily, as a customer, notice that in the moment, but it will still be part of that interaction in one way or another, even if you haven't like in the moment sort of thought that.
Yeah,
But that just shows, that exemplifies, I think, just how like important that interaction is, and how much of a lasting impact it can create if you're careful and if you're good at it.
yeah.
I used to work as a sales associate in uni, like between uni during the summer. I
Hmm.
learned so much about just how to approach people. Like there was a specific like handbook, let's say, on the however many steps. Like that's when you make the eye contact, and then you make sure that you're receptive. You don't just go in with the "Hi, how can I help you?" Blah blah. Are you looking for blah blah? No, just like making sure that the person knows that you're approaching them, and being sensitive and receptive to how they want the interaction to go. So yeah, so do you think there's a science to approaching people, or do you think and interacting with customers, or do you think there's a part of it that's natural because it has to be genuine?
Right.
So what's the balance?
Well, that's an interesting question. Whether it's art or it's science, I think it's a little bit of both. Um, I think the most important thing is to feel a connection with that customer. Even if it's superficial. But again, my mission is to make sure that you leave the store with a package in your hand and you're happy about it. So again, it's finding out more about you. One day, a longtime customer came into the store, and my mother worked there too, as did many other of my relatives. So this customer comes in. My father says to her, "I had a dream about you last night." She's looking over at my mother. My father's talking about having a dream about it. And she comes back to look at him. He said, "I dreamt I sold you this leg of lamb." Uh, and so she laughed and he laughed and my mother laughed. But most importantly, she bought the leg of lamb. So having a good sense of humor certainly helps, and listening to the customer. And if there's an issue, you're going to take care of it. Yeah, because we've established this trust. I say this is simple stuff, but
Yeah,
the actual doing it is the hard part. I say about customer service, I kind of compare it to a song. So everybody knows the words, but very few people can carry the tune.
right. I think that's very profound.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And at Nordstrom, you can actually get a hold of the Nordstroms who run the company now. That sets the tone, that sends a message to everybody else that you should be accessible to not only your external customers, but your internal customers, the people who you work with and who work for you.
100%. Would you say that's that you can define that as like a customer obsessed culture? Because people throw around that term a lot these days, like customer obsessed. Um, but what does that actually mean? And is that what we're talking about?
Well, that is reinforcing literally every day the fact that the customer relationship is the most important relationship. And it's not just the people who come in and buy merchandise from you, it's your relationship with your vendors. How can we do a better job working with you?
Okay.
Whoever is on there, he always asks, how can we do a better job?
Let's keep the conversation going. You can now join our community on LinkedIn for more exclusive content, insights, and discussions. Simply search for Loyalize on LinkedIn. Speak about humility a lot as well. I think that's very important when dealing with people, because people don't want to feel the second that you don't have humility or modesty, the second that people start to feel ostracized or left out. And
Mhm.
that's exactly what you don't want customers to feel.
Yeah. Well, the Nordstroms take the approach of being a what they call a servant leader. I work for them. I'm there to support them. So Nordstrom is set up informally as an inverted pyramid.
Right.
Speaking to somebody from Egypt talking about pyramids, this is a first for me. Uh,
Inverted pyramid? Okay.
Right, right, right. But it's an inverted pyramid. So the top is on the bottom. So at the very top of the inverted pyramid are the customers.
Mm-hmm.
The next level are the sales and support people, and then managers, and then at the very bottom are the lowly board of directors. And that's a literal and a symbolic way of how they run their business. So when somebody at Nordstrom has gotten a promotion, they don't say I'm moving up. They say I'm moving down the pyramid. I'm moving
Right.
down the pyramid. So that's a symbolic thing that the most important people besides the customers are the people who interact with the customers, and you're there to support them and make sure that they have everything that they need to do a good job. And everybody is in the customer service business. I don't care what kind of business you're in. If you have a customer, you are in the customer service business, and you need to find a way to create happy, satisfied, repeat customers.
What can brands do now to change their culture that would then trickle down into customer service?
And companies have to take a hard look at their reputation. What do they feel that they're doing well? Where do they feel that they have improvement? And it's important for the leadership. And this is one of the most important things I can stress. It's important for the leadership to participate in all this. If you want a customer service experience, if executives feel that customer service is beneath them, then nothing's ever going to happen.
If we just go back to your books, so
Mhm.
what's one lesson from your first book in the Nordstrom Way series that still rings true today in your latest book, The Century Old Startup? And what's one lesson that's evolved or a new addition?
Mhm. Well, it's interesting. I have to think back because I wrote the first book 30 years ago, or it came out 30 years ago. And part of it, I'm going to repeat what I said about culture, because that is the overriding theme, and which promotes a customer service culture, and it's looking, part of it to sustain a company. You're looking for people who like to give service, people who are other centered rather than self centered. So, and that's really the essence of it, to bring in people who like people. Because if you don't like people, especially in retail, you are in the wrong business. Uh, because you're going to deal with people, and sometimes they'll be fun to deal with, and sometimes they'll be a big pain. to deal with. But that's part of the deal. And so you need to constantly reinforce the fact that you're in the customer service business. How do you do that? You do that through storytelling. A woman was shopping at a Nordstrom store in the evening, came home, and was getting ready for bed, and noticed that one of the diamonds from her wedding band had fallen off. So, she had been trying on clothes, so she went back to the Nordstrom store the very next morning, first thing in the morning, went to the women's department and got on her hands and knees and started looking for her diamond. A Nordstrom employee who was in loss prevention saw this woman on the floor on her hands and knees, and he's like, "Can I help you?" And she tells him what happened. He takes her contact information. Now, he could have just taken her contact information and gone on his way. Part of his job description was not, helping a customer find her diamond. He could have said, if we come across it, I'll let you know. No, he was proactive. He went back to the people in the cleaners and housekeeping who actually vacuum the department. They went back in the back room. They started opening up full vacuum cleaner bags.
Whoa.
And they went through 6 vacuum cleaner bags. Have you ever opened up a vacuum cleaner bag? It's pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
And so they opened up one. Again, people involved in the story are telling this on the video. So they opened up one, and there it was, this beautiful diamond with this sparkling. So they contacted the customer. Her name was Mrs. Shaw, and he said, "Mrs. Shaw, I think we have something of yours." So as she says on the video, my heart just leapt. She said, "It was insured. I could have bought another diamond, but this was my diamond." So not only did they have her come to the store, they took the diamond and they put it in a jewelry box. They didn't just, "Hey, here's your diamond." No, they made it a special experience. So they gave it to her, and she had tears in her eyes, and it was a very emotional thing. And as she said on the video, customer service is not just buying stuff. It's everybody. Not only the salespeople, but the people who clean the stores. And she said, "You've got me. I am. I'm a Nordstrom customer for life." So there's three things you asked. Did you provide a great customer experience? Yes. Did you create loyalty? Absolutely. Did you contribute to the bottom line? She's not going anywhere else. And if you want to go onto YouTube, and if you type in Nordstrom Diamond Story, it's only 3 minutes. You'll see the story, and I show that at my presentation. Now, these gentlemen were not salespeople; they were not in customer service, but because of the culture that they were in, they thought nothing less than to take care of this customer. So everybody is in the customer service department. Doesn't matter, what your name is, what your title is. You are in the customer service department.
I really like that you really hammer on this with culture, that it's an inside out approach. And I think that gets lost on brands a lot. You've showed me how customer service can be a medium it's just a medium for people to connect and create lovely moments. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the context of a transaction, even though that is like the inherent context.
Well, thank you. I enjoy it, and I'm endlessly fascinated by Nordstrom. That's why I've written 5 books.
Before we wrap up our conversation, I did want to ask you some quick would you rather questions.
Okay.
Would you rather have a loyal but difficult customer, or an easy/pleasant customer who never comes back?
Well, I would pick the loyal customer every time, and I would have the hope that as we establish our relationship, they'll become less difficult.
Would you rather win awards for service excellence or receive a heartfelt thank you letter from a customer?
having the heartfelt customer, because the word, I mean, it may be numbers or whatever, but if you have a sincere interaction with a customer, it's not only you can give yourself a pat on the back because you've done a good job, but in an ideal world that customer will come back to you, but also they'll tell their friends and relatives, I had a great experience with this particular salesperson, and I bet that they would be great for you too.
And I think as well the letter is sort of similar to the diamond story, because even though it was just a one-on-one interaction, that's still like the ripple effect of that was more profound. So yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Would you rather have one huge public service disaster or 100 small private ones?
That's an interesting question. Well, I guess it depends on how big that big mistake was.
The
Uh,
biggest.
well, the biggest, my imagination is running away from me. But let's say that it's still something that you can handle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so customers can be forgiving if there's a mistake, if you fix it,
Right.
if you have respect for the for the person, you hear what they're saying, you understand it. You don't just say, well, sorry, it won't happen again. You find a way to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
That will create loyalty.
I think what you said about forgiveness is really important as well. We had on a previous episode, we had Amanda Cromhout, who's a big personality in loyalty.
Mhm.
And I asked her to define loyalty, and she said it's the ability to forgive when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's in line with what you just said.
Whether it's a business relationship or a romantic relationship. If you don't have the trust, then the whole thing is worthless. So loyalty is the byproduct of past trust. You asked me about my most recent books. I'll give you some background on that. So during COVID, the Nordstrom stores were closed and the offices were closed. So how do you communicate with your people to give them updates on what's happening with their employer? So
Mm-hmm.
every Friday, the two Nordstrom brothers, Pete and Eric Nordstrom, would do a Zoom cast for open to everyone in the company, and they would give updates on where the store is, how they're doing business, when they plan to open, what the store will look like when they do open up, and the safety measures, et cetera, et cetera. Then they would invariably close the Zoomcast with saying, "Our company has been in business since 1901. We've endured recessions, the Great Depression, world wars, the changing nature of retail, the changing nature of fashion. We've adapted to those things and we'll adapt to this." So I listened to all these podcasts and I said to myself, well, that's a book. How do you survive? How do you stay relevant? So I went through all the four Nordstrom books that I had written. The founder, John W. Nordstrom, did a book in 1963, a short book about his life. There was a book about the second generation. He had three sons, and then Bruce Nordstrom, the father of the guys who run the company now. I ghost wrote his memoir called "Leave It Better Than You Found It." So I went through all these books and I looked. I found examples and ideas that are consistent throughout their history. So I created an acronym of FACTS, FACTS:
Mm-hmm.
flexibility, agility, communication, transformation, social responsibility. Communication is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing that most companies don't get right. Now, George Bernard Shaw, the playwright, once said that the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So you have to constantly find ways to communicate. Transformation, I mean, that's all a part of how we stay relevant. And then social responsibility. How do you deal with your employees? How do you deal with the products that you sell, and where they're sourced, and what kind of labor is involved? And so all that is a part of doing business. So the book is called The Century Old Startup, subtitled The Nordstrom Way to Embracing Change, Challenges, and a Culture of Customer Service. So
Okay.
that's my new book, and I'm going to be doing an update on the book later on this year, probably in the third quarter.
Nice, exciting. I
Yeah.
think it's very pertinent now, like the topic of change, as we're coming onto the cusp of so much change when it comes to digitization and artificial intelligence, like we were mentioning earlier. So I think um, that's a big one. That's
Yeah.
it's like the internet one with Amazon, the cusp of everything with the internet boom in the 90s. Similar thing is happening now, so I think it's good timing.
I hope so.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, for this really insightful conversation. I've learned a lot.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I'd love to visit Egypt and see the actual pyramids.
Yes, please do.